there's no way I'm going to have that congressman on from, what is it, Minnesota? What's his name? Keith Phillips?
Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips. I'm not interested in having a conservative challenger to Joe Biden on the show. I'm just not. People can go find it. It's not like,
He's younger, though.
I'm just not interested in that. And so the only candidates that are available, at least within the Democratic primary, are Marianne Williamson and RFK. And I have a pre-existing relationship with RFK. So when he entered into the race, I wasn't sure, like, what should I do about this? And I wasn't quite sure how he was going to run. In fact, when he gave his speech on day one, I was like, there's some themes in here that are, that I've always appreciated that Bobby brings up. He didn't hit any of the anti-vax stuff. I think he hit some COVID stuff that I found a little bit problematic, but I wasn't sure where it's going to go. It's very hard at the beginning to understand something because you need to see sort of like the tail in the head as to where it's going.
The submerged part, that's what conspiracy theorists do, right? Is like, especially when you're launching your campaign in the Democratic primary, you're going to keep the real stuff in below the surface.
I don't know. I have no opinion on that. With Marianne Williamson, her issue set has, my assumption has always been would appeal to me.
Yeah, Harvey K is informing.
Harvey K is stuff. Yes, and Michael always was a fan. Mm-hmm. I was always a little bit skeptical, but like you don't necessarily get the primary candidate you want. You go with the primary candidate you got. But since that time, like she's gone through multiple campaign managers. There's like, I don't know, a bunch of them that has written some letter. I have no way of assessing it, but this is not the sign of a healthy campaign where you have like a field manager who says like, she doesn't seem to have any interest in getting on the ballot. And, I don't know how to assess the reality of that. I just know that like generally you don't see that kind of campaign that happening from multiple waves of former staffers. But be that as it may, the most disappointing thing to me, just broadly speaking, is to see like that RFK, and I've been saying this for months, Donald Trump could pick this guy as vice president. And it seems to me that he's been running a candidacy that is geared towards conservatives. Because there is no way in hell you can say that RFK is running to the left of the Joe Biden presidency. Remember, like Joe Biden ran, he was not able to deliver it, but he ran and promoted the idea of a public option within the Affordable Care Act. Is that sufficient in my estimation? No way. But be clear, that's what he did. And then RFK steps in with this guy who completely does not challenge him on any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about a softball interview.
Typical establishment
mainstream media.
Yeah, corporate media maybe. Well, establishment at least.
What is your idea on healthcare?
My idea on healthcare is to get rid of the chronic disease. We spend $4.3 trillion in healthcare. And 80% of that is chronic.
Pause it. Now, disease. I'm not exactly sure what Kennedy's referencing here. My guess would be, diabetes is certainly a chronic disease, type 2 diabetes. I imagine, heart disease. Maybe there's some other sort of like chronic.
Be healthier.
Well, I mean, there are public policy things you could do. Like, I think our subsidies to corn probably really contribute to things like obesity and to type 2 diabetes. I think that like certainly we have toxins that exist in our area, but every time that we have a new EPA law or whatever it is, it's challenged in the courts and by big industry. But I think it's good for people to be healthier and to increase that. But that seems like, I don't know. That's an interesting response to that question. Let's hear more.
Well, and I just got to say, that is a very bold claim to make. that you're going to work to get rid of chronic disease? Like, other countries have not had success in doing such a thing.
We have
We have higher rates. You can cut into it, but if you're going to make that
Without
claim,
universal health care.
if you're going to make that claim, you better give that caveat that, like, I'm going to work on this.
Well,
as
what,
opposed to,
and what's the mechanism?
yeah.
What's the mechanism in which you're going to do this?
Can we just get that exact phrasing just back like 10 seconds?
He's going to
for a
get rid
second?
of chronic disease.
Get rid of?
Or work on it. I mean,
That's nuts.
yeah, well, I don't know. Joe Biden said he's going to
Getting rid
try
of
and cure cancer.
But that might be because he secretly got told about some advancement and leaked it out. But that's just me being.
That's
just me being.
All right, well, listen.
Well,
rid of the chronic disease. We spend $4.3 trillion in healthcare, and 80% of that is that goes to chronic disease. So everybody, like I said, everybody's idea is are different ways of assigning the cost, but nobody's talking about how do you reduce the cost. What I'm going to do is reduce the cost. I'm going to identify what's causing chronic disease and eliminate those exposures. And then, then we go back.
Pause it. Wait a second. He's not saying that Wi-Fi is causing this. He's saying chemicals. There are chemicals.
I would hope so, yeah. But,
There are chemicals. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, I guess you could have the entire government, doing research on this, but you'd have conservatives up in arms about that. But okay, I'm just trying to be, let's be generous.
Yeah.
And say, like, okay, he's going to be able to be, as president, he's going to find out what's causing chronic disease and then, I guess, not necessarily pass laws. Well, he could pass laws through Congress. That's one way of doing it. It's unlikely with this Supreme Court that there's going to be a whole host of new things that the EPA can do through executive action and whatnot. But go ahead.
Identify what's causing chronic disease and eliminate those exposures. And then, then we go back to 1960 when we had 6% chronic disease and we were paying 1/20th for our health care that we are today. Those costs, eliminating chronic disease are going to make those costs drop.
So you don't. You're not a Medicare for All guy.
Well, my choice would be Medicare for All.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but not immediately. I think you need a private.
Like something like Australia?
Well, I don't know, what country I would model after, but I think that the Medicare for All ought to be available for people, and with public-private options available as well. If you want to go to private insurer for concierge service or whatever.
What does that mean? Medicaid for all be so? Medicaid would be available to everybody. So I guess maybe that sounds like a public option.
did he say Medicaid?
He did, yeah.
He said Medicaid, which is fine. I mean, frankly, the Medicare for All proposal that Bernie had sounded more actually in practice like Medicaid for All. But if everybody's taking it and you're going to force the doctors to accept it, maybe a certain percentage, then what you're talking about is like a public option, it seems like.
It's kind of similar to where Dora's previous Democratic primary favorite, Tulsi Gabbard, ended up, which is that a single payer system would be un-American, but maybe we can do something for people that fall through the cracks.
Okay, public option. It's pretty clear that I think maybe Kenny doesn't know what Australia is going on in Australia, but that's okay. Okay. Continue.
Medicare for all for who want it, kind of, right? Like
Yeah,
that's close. So that's public option-ish, right? At least for now.
Medicare for all, who want it.
For
like
who want it.
Pete Buttigieg, I think. Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
People, and with public-private options available as well. If you want to go to private insurer for concierge service or whatever, that you can do that and give people as much freedom as possible. But guarantee health care. But
you would guarantee health care for everybody in America?
Well, my best option would be to do that. I don't think that you can do that all at once, and I can tell you this. That is a battle that I think is polarizing. And that is, because the power of the pharmaceutical industry and the power of the medical cartel, that it's just, at this point, it's too much of a heavy lift.
Pause it. Now, wait a second. Let me be clear here now. It's polarizing to guarantee health care for everybody. The industry forces too much of a lift. So we see the constraints that are there in terms of providing everybody health care, but supposedly these constraints will not exist there in whatever the exposures are that are creating chronic illness. Now, you'll notice that all of this stuff is completely vague. The only thing that's specific is that, no, I wouldn't guarantee health care for everybody. That's too heavy of a lift. And the journalist who's sitting there asking, or whatever, the interviewer is just sitting there sort of smirking and trying to figure out, like, feed this guy, well, how about saying this? Mm-hmm. It's weird, but go ahead.
But it's just, at this point, it's too much of a heavy lift.
Too much of a heavy lift.
You know, you're never going to get there. So what I'm going to focus on
Never
is
gonna
things
get
that
there.
I can actually do, you know, and not promise people things that I'm not going to be able to do.
What about a public option?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about that.
Yeah.
You could do that. That's what you're saying, but you couldn't.
Well, no, I don't even know if you can get into a public option at this point with this Congress.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
My choice
But the
would be
overwhelming-
to begin with a public option. And then, you know, Medicare, if Medicare for All would take years to work out the kinks to make sure that people like it, that it's popular, that they're doing it right, you need to have a public option during that period anyway. Oh, you know, that's how I do it. I'm not running on that issue because what I'm running on are issues that I think every American is going to be able to get behind.
Pause it. So wait a second. Every American can't get behind getting a guaranteed health insurance. Now, that may be, in fact, it may be the case that is controversial, although I've certainly heard from certain quarters that that's not controversial at all. That, in fact, just even a vote in Congress against that would basically start a revolution. That's my understanding.
Primary.
So I imagine, you know, maybe if that guy, this interviewer, has heard that rhetoric,
Yeah.
that just a vote in Congress that would fail on Medicare for All would literally start a revolution.
Yeah, no,
And that would get us that. I'm sure we're going to hear, maybe this interviewer has heard that before, but maybe he hasn't. But here's Bobby Kennedy won't even say, incidentally, Barack Obama ran on a public option, and the jettisoning of that was considered a massive betrayal.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
Biden ran on a public option and didn't have the Senate and the Congress that he needed to institute that. But I'm sure that's just an excuse that somebody would use. And if somebody ever brought up that excuse on this show, there'd be hell to pay.
Oh,
Hold
yeah.
on, they'll play the clip.
On that issue, because what I'm running on are issues that I think every American is going to be able to get behind, and that is going to avoid the polarization. And but if you ask me personally, you know what I think the fairest way to do it, I don't think
Dave Rubin.
what's happening now, where we have we have this monetized system that is brutal. And
It's the worst system.
yeah, it's the worst system in the world. We spend more than anybody else, and we get we're
Concerned with the
79th
cost.
in terms of outcomes. So we're behind Mongolia, we're behind Cuba. We have the sickest population in the world. We pay more for healthcare than anybody in the world. It's not working.
Not working.
Right.
Pause it, but just to be clear, he's also made it clear that that's not what his campaign's about.
Yeah. The medical
This is a
cartel.
horrible thing that's happening here. We have bad outcomes. We're paying too much. But that's not what this
Yeah, I'm gonna
campaign's
stick to-
about.
I'm
Well,
stick-
I want to know what the campaign's about.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm just going to stick to emphasizing things that everyone can get behind, like the standard turnaround time for Secret Service protection requests, where you include the numbers 14 and 88.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But the medical cartel, they're horrible. They're ruining people's outcomes. They are
Don't
responsible for chronic disease, but we can't polarize
We can
them by eliminating them and creating a socialized healthcare system. That would be too heavy of a lift. But I'm also going to take on the medical cartel, and Medicare for All is too hard to do, but I'm going to wave a wand and solve chronic disease.
Yeah, I'm going to take on the pharmaceuticals by de-arming on the main issue that challenges that.
Why is climate change going to work in the free market, but the problem with the medicine is it's monetized? All right, continue.
So we're behind Mongolia. We're behind Cuba. We have the sickest population in the world. We pay more for healthcare than anybody.
Is this
in the world.
interviewer
It's not
on some
working.
type of drugs or something?
Right.
He's just like sitting there. He's just so wistful.
You know, what I'm trying to focus on is things that I can politically get done in my first term in office. And, you know, Obama, you know, basically blew all of his capital on Obamacare. And that was, and, you know, people are still.
Barack Obama never had any intention of doing anything with his capital.
Pause it. Now, this is funny, and we could keep watching this because it's hilarious, but it's actually, frankly, too painful. This ding-dong, who's just basically been okay with RFK saying, my campaign's not about getting health care for everybody. I don't even have any aspirations about that. Like on day one, I'm going to surrender that because it's too hard in Congress and it's too polarizing. The American public doesn't want it, even though it's a horrific situation. Now, maybe that's very honest. I mean, I guess it is, but it's certainly inconsistent. Well, first of all, he's clearly not running to the left of Joe Biden on this. And the idea of getting rid of chronic disease, well, Biden wanted to get rid of cancer. I mean, okay, but how does that work? If you're not willing to tackle the interests that are associated with healthcare, what makes you think you're going to be able to tackle the interest associated with like petrochemicals? And then Kennedy, who has not really dug into the healthcare, like he says, not part of his campaign, says the reason why I wouldn't do it is because Barack Obama expended all of his political cachet to expand Medicaid and to expand the number of people who are insured in this country. I mean, the reality is there's 20 more million people probably on Medicaid now than there would have been. And maybe another 8 or 9 on, private insurance. Prices are going through the roof. But nevertheless, the insurance is a better product. And Medicaid is expanded. Again, necessary but insufficient. Shouldn't have been private. Should have been done just. And the public option would have at least had a toehold in there to begin to build off of. But Kennedy says Obama expanded all his political cachet on that, and it basically left him incapable of doing anything else. And this ding-dong, this sort of like a guy who's sort of like bootlicking, has no problem with just like writing off Medicare for All.
I hate the establishment media.
Says, oh, well, Obama never had any political cachet. And then Kennedy can't push back on, well, that's just completely controversial what I just said. And the whole reason why I'm not going to bring up health insurance in the first place. I mean, it's fascinating to watch this sort of dance between, well, one guy who's getting funded by David Sachs and whose campaign is, bankrolled by a Republican, and another guy who's getting paid probably on Rumble to do the same thing by the same group of people.
Investment there.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, are we playing more?
No, I mean, there really is. I mean, good to go on for, the host to talk about all the things that Obama did that was horrible. Well, largely, I agree with.
Yeah.
Then complains about people didn't count how many bombs Obama dropped relative to George W. Bush. But of course, ignores the fact that if that's the calculus, then Joe Biden's a saint relative to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But in terms of drone strikes, but
to me, the RFK preoccupation with the cost and how sick American population is, like, I know real things that we have to deal with, but like that seems to me like a guy who's worried his crypto is going to be taxed because so people don't get price discriminated out of healthcare. Like that those are not the things that I'm concerned
too
about.
much of his support, because of where the money comes from, is from people who are very concerned about their concierge care. Right. And listen, when Bernie Sanders said that we need to get rid of private insurance, my feeling was always this. If you have constraints on medical providers that a certain percentage of their business, and wonks can figure it out. Is it 80? Is it 85%? Is it 78%? Whatever. Must be Medicare insurance provide or Medicare for All, whatever we call that, provided by that, and you allow them 20%, you can do private insurance. Then the effect that you want from outlawing private insurance is diminished, and over time you may have more political ability to deal with that. But
yeah, that's the time. We'll deal with that over time, as opposed to
but
maybe
they know
we'll do a public
that
option.
the private insurance rates would go skyrocketed. So they don't want to price out like everybody in the top 10%. That it would just be the 1%.
Yeah. And, I mean, look, it's just some people just don't really respect, I think, the urgency of what we need in terms of getting Medicare for all. I think us on this program, we've led the way in leftist media spaces of just saying how urgent it is that we need socialized healthcare. Some members of the media are less invested in that project, and that doesn't necessarily, mean that everything they say doesn't have a value. Sometimes it means that, but I feel like the Majority Report has been at the forefront of advocating for socialized healthcare and being steadfast in that. Some people just aren't, on that level.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people who Jimmy got with the whole force to vote thing not happy with this sort of, pivot that he's making, or apology, or sort of toleration that he's given.
The thing that's really sort of, like I say, quite clear is that increasingly it is clear that RFK is not running to the left of Joe Biden. And frankly, like, it is unclear to me, like, what is he running for? Is it just to get out of to stop funding Ukraine? I mean, it is largely, it seems like, just get rid of the CDC or to indict Fauci. What happens if Fauci dies? And I appreciate the idea of, like, we need to have better regulatory agencies. But if you do not realize this is a structural problem, then at best, if you were to somehow, as president, unilaterally be able to go in there and completely change the direction of these regulatory agencies, at best, that would be undone when you're no longer president. But it is, I think, it's a folly to assume you can go in there and do that without everything else that's involved in it, without in some way, like, dealing with the enormous costs associated with fighting the legal fronts, particularly with the judiciary we have. I mean, I don't know how RFK thinks that a party that has talked about getting rid of the EPA, like getting rid of it, getting rid of the FDA, getting rid of the CDC, is going to allow for the increases in budget that's associated with actually doing a better job of cleaning up our environment. And I don't understand how he also contends that we can deal with climate change through the free market. The same forces that allow for these companies to poison us are the same forces that allow for other companies to increase the CO2 that is causing climate change. It's a muddled mess. And it's impressively depressing.
It's also important to note, because I think a lot of RFK supporters like to harp on why won't they give him a chance? It's like he's not even giving himself a chance. He was at 20% in late May, and now he's at 13% among Democratic primary
It's
voters.
very hard for me to believe that he's running in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
It's just when he keeps talking about bringing people together, it sounds to me, and not being polarizing, in an environment like where there is literally no position that a Democrat could take, if they're running as a Democrat against a Republican, that would not be polarizing. I'm sorry. This is the nature of the country we're in.
And only doing getting under 15% as a Kennedy is a extreme embarrassment, I think. Like, he's got to do a lot better, or this is like, I mean, all the people that said you shouldn't run, like, they were absolutely right.
Well, the most disappointing thing about it was I never thought that there was an opportunity for him to win anything.
Right.
And if he doesn't talk about vaccinations, and he doesn't talk about Wi-Fi, and he talks about the environment. Like, I mean, there is Jeff Merkley bemoaned the fact that there was not a candidate who is running in some way to pressure Biden to do better in terms of climate change. And Kennedy's response is, as far as I know, I mean, he put it out as an ad with Peterson, was climate change is being used for authoritarian means. Right. And we should let the free market handle it. Like, what is the point of this campaign?
Well,
what is the point of it? From the perspective of challenging a sitting Democratic president, what is the point of it? I know what that guy Donalds or whatever it is, what's his name? Byron, no, the guy from Minnesota who's going to run against him.
Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips. I know what his point's going to be.
Yeah.
His point's going to be, we got to stop, all this stuff about, providing social support for people. And we've got to maybe, bridge the divide on abortion. Who knows what it is? Or we've got to, have more tax breaks for corporations. I understand that's the point of his campaign. But I have no idea what the point of this challenge of the Democratic president is. I mean, Marianne Williamson may be a bad candidate in terms of like getting on the ballot and whatnot, but I know what her policies are for. I don't think she's done necessarily a particularly great job of like focusing on one thing. The best candidacy we've seen in this, undoubtedly, whether you like him or not, but just in measuring it, was Bernie Sanders in 2016. The only fault that he had was that he just thought he was running only an issue campaign. He underestimated what he was doing, but the issue nobody walked away from that campaign not knowing what it was about, and it pulled the Democratic Party to the left.
And it's useful, like, to have those primary candidates make, okay, now this is the thing that the Biden campaign has to respond to that day. But Kennedy, it's like, there's part of the Democratic Party that's too critical of Israel, for instance.
Yeah.
And like, okay, that's very helpful issue candidate we got going.
You guys, Scott, we just got to like start to make some conclusions, I think, about the real motives here.
I think that might be. I really do think it. I think there's a VP candidacy. I just don't know how anybody could sit down and go, like, this is how we're going to win the Democratic primary, or this is how we're going to have an impact in the Democratic Party and run this way.
Chaos might just be the only.
But they're doing chaos poorly too.
I agree, but like, I mean, he's being photographed with like Roger Stone and all those people. I mean, like, they don't really give a shit about the nature of the chaos. They just want the chaos to exist. And they got someone who is willing to go out there and thinks he has some sort of savior complex. I mean, I don't know him personally. He seems to have this like evangelist kind of.
But let's say the chaos.
Right.
I understand why he might be doing it because but
they're exploiting his desire to do this, and they're like But
if you're Dennis Kucinich or whatever, and you're the campaign manager, and you're saying, how do we create chaos in the Democratic primary? The way you do it is by reaching out to the cohort of people who think that Joe Biden has failed on things like climate, or that and
even the war stuff,
and the being too in what way the war, like, I Ukraine?
mean, he's Ukraine, RFK.
I don't think there's a huge cohort of people in the Democratic Party.
That,
I mean, you find an issue which will make Biden look bad to his own constituency, and they're not even doing that. That's what I'm saying.
But they don't need to be competent to be attempting to be wreckers.
It's surprising how incompetent at being wreckers. Like, it does not look to me that that's what they're trying to do, because you would change tact when your poll numbers drop from 20 to 14.
Once he runs as an independent, then maybe we'll have a conversation. I mean, who knows that? Or he goes says I'm leaving the left or whatever.
Because like I at this point now, and I think like I think his intentions aren't extremely sus, but I think the impact he's having is one, like getting a bunch of like formerly Reagan Democrats to
There are no more Reagan Democrats.
well, like whoever's gonna be like, I see so many people be like, yeah, my uncle's thinking about voting for RFK, as if like I should be concerned about that. It's like, is your uncle a former Republican that's going to register in the Democratic primary to vote for this guy? Like, great way to own the Democrats that way.
It's so strange. But all right, should we?
243.
Oh gosh, folks.
The Crowder thing we can do tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to do the Crowder thing tomorrow.
He's just timeless.
Folks, I'm sorry, we've run out of time.
We got to let the world react to the fact that he's spreading his shit thin over DePaulo, those two twins, Alex Jones and the Hodge twins, and who's the other guy?
Callen.
Oh, Brian Callen.
Brian
yeah.
Callen. Are they now? Have they started a network on Rumble? Is that it?
Apparently, all those guys are under the Mug Club now.
They're under the Mug Club.
Well, watch out, Daily Wire.
Yeah.
Look at that talent
and
pool.
What do
Crowder's
they
like-
call it? What is it? Dick Smack? What do they call their?
Nut Tap.
Nut Tap.
Sack tap.
Sack Tap.
Third time's the charm
call it
on the
Nut
Sack
Tap.
Tap.
Why
yeah.
don't they call it the Sack Tap Club?
They
Yeah.
should do that. I mean, yeah, in our HR documents, we have to be a little bit more anatomically correct, but when we, speak about how we should be doing that to each other,